Anna, everyone.
Hello.
Anna, what is your favorite ice cream flavor?
Vanilla.
Vanilla. That's right. Well, we are very vanilla friendly here. That's okay. That's okay. Anna is a front-end developer with over 12 years of experience. And Anna, you spent a lot of time with beautiful legacy code. Is that right?
Sorry?
You spent a lot of time with beautiful legacy code.
Yes, yes, amazing, beautiful. I wouldn't touch it.
Anybody feels Anybody feels like home in legacy? Yeah, like those people who are like really burned in the past. Well, how do we deal with legacy? A lot of times when we're working on any kind of projects, legacy finds its way to get into our life. And it's usually something that's very important for the business, but at the same time, something that you're not supposed to touch unless you have to. People who were building it are left years ago. There is no documentation about it either. There's like a lot of mess around, and we are the ones who have to clean up. That's not fair, but we have to, right? So how do we deal with that? And so I'm very happy to get some insights about how do we refactor CSS and how do we dive and deal with old, maybe code. And I'm very happy to have Anna with us. So please give a warm round of applause to Anna Rodriguez.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Toby, for easing my fear of doing the talk immediately after lunch, because I know the sleepies happen, and that was great. Thank you. You saved me a lot of trouble, so thank you. And today, I'm going to be talking about refactoring CSS. My name is Anna, and I've been working as a front-end developer for at least 13 years, and I'm currently at Hacktar. We are a tech for good agency, and we dedicate ourselves to charities and other projects that we deemed to be good for society, and we specialize in Wagtail CMS, but I work on the front end of it. And I love the indie web, and my life has completely changed since I've built my personal blog. In fact, so much so that at even one time I was invited to write about it for Smashing magazine. And I never miss an opportunity on stage to tell you that you should have your own personal website. And when I'm not working on my personal website, I'm probably doing some DIY. We recently bought our family home, an old Victorian home, and I've been the project manager, the interior designer, and the handy woman in it. And guess what? I am going to take on that journey too. And as it got renovated, or shall I say refactored. And I found quite a few similar struggles. So this talk came into my head after returning to work following a year of maternity leave about 2 years ago. And that year away coincided with a bunch of new CSS features that I'm still catching up on even now. So I was always wondering, what is the latest approach? How do you build a hero nowadays? What about a card? We love a card. What had the experts written while I was away? So I created this really overwhelming pressure that I needed to prove that I still had it, and that becoming a mother hadn't somehow diminished my technical skills. So my return to work became unexpectedly miserable, and I was terrified of making mistakes or choosing suboptimal solutions, and the blank canvas that once excited me now left me really anxious and riddled with decision paralysis. And I'm talking about CSS and a brand new home. I felt the same when picking colors for my new home. I took weeks to decide because I was so afraid of making the wrong decision. And even though my family reassured me, like, don't worry, if you pick the wrong color, just paint over it, I just couldn't see it that way, because in my mind it was a waste of time and a waste of money. But when I was assigned maintenance tasks or small feature additions to existing projects, I felt a wave of relief. The scaffolding was already there, and the major decisions had already been made by someone else. And I could make incremental improvements based on new knowledge that I'd acquired. So these constraints weren't limiting, they were liberating to me. I felt the same when looking at my home. The empty room filled with stripped carpets, the exposed floorboards, and bare walls absolutely terrified me. And I was terrified of choosing the wrong color, the wrong flooring, the wrong placement of electrical outlets, and it was a mess. But in the kitchen, which I had accepted that I couldn't fully refactor because of time and money, I looked for quick improvements. For example, I replaced all the cabinet handles to match the existing countertop. They were a bit used, grimy, and simply replacing them made them feel brand new. bear in mind, when I took this photo, I didn't think about this talk. This was the only photo I had, so it's full of rubbish. But trust me, that black handle is much prettier than the existing one. It was a small improvement, but it made a massive difference once it was cleaned. Similarly, when tackling legacy code, I had a baseline for comparison, a tangible measure of improvement. And when I made a change, I could see the before and after, and I was getting pretty good confidence that my work was valuable. And there was something quite satisfying about this that building from scratch wasn't really giving to me. And maybe it's psychological, but it shifted my perspective completely. What once prompted sighs of like, oh, what a pain to work in this project, it gets me excited now because I know I can make it better. And I can see the value that I'm adding with this change. So I work in an agency, and most of you might be freelancers or work at other agencies, and we know we're not always building from scratch. Even in product teams, chances are you're probably working on internal tools that have been built many, many years ago. So we're not always building something brand new with the latest technology giving into the CV-driven development. It's also quite unlikely that you're building a new home from scratch. And I want to make it clear that this talk is not about dismissing legacy code bases and that you should be immediately be keen to refactor them once you inherit one. And I could wrap up quite quickly and say, oh, just implement the design system and move on. But it's not about that either. We can't ignore budget constraints of smaller organizations, especially in today's economy. And I work with charities that are cash-strapped. The reality of CSS maintenance is that it just works without requiring a lot of attention. And CSS has evolved significantly in recent years with many new features and very exciting things. But the website built 8 or 9 years ago won't be using this, and it still works. And legacy CSS can reveal undocumented product decisions, especially when you inherit projects built by someone else. And you have to do a lot of figuring it out. We all want to live in a world where there's a design system and a design system and a dedicated team for said design system, but that's very rarely happens. And more often than not, the code that is live is your documentation. It will have special considerations or is focused on certain user needs, and those probably are not documented anywhere else. For example, an example we quite often forget about is print style sheets. At Hacktar, we work with a lot of charities that provide support for a variety of illnesses. Imagine a website that informs people about recipes or meal tips for meals that they can do to manage their condition. People will often want to print those, or print helpful notes or questions to take to a doctor's appointment if they have anxiety and they don't know how to speak up. Having something built for them and printed will help them. Or in projects with a high team turnover, the moment someone leaves and another joins, they'll have a brand new vision that can clash with what currently exists. Most small organizations do not have sophisticated documentation systems because they're typically overstretched, overworked, and have zero money. I took this photo in our loft when we removed the old carpet. Danger. Maybe pipes? We'll never know. I didn't open it up, I just carpeted over and carried on, because that's what we do. The code is often the only place where developers documented technical constraints they faced. It's not unusual to find in your code things like sorry or explaining unexpected bugs or browser quirks, and we've all been there. We all want to hand over the best code in the world, but we've all been in situations that time constraints and simply being a human made us come up with solutions that work with the circumstances we had at the time. So what motivates a CSS refactoring? It's normally as a consequence of performance or accessibility sprints, because these have good measurable before and after results, due to brand redesigns or visual identity changes that don't necessarily require building the website from scratch. Sometimes some tools, especially if you're using CSS in JS, get discontinued, and then you're stuck. Ask me how I know. When adding new features, you may start to find problems like inheriting unexpected styles. And when I think about CSS refactor, I think about some of the projects that we inherited where adding a new feature became incredibly painful and time-consuming. So I'm mostly going to focus on that one. Right. This was a good day at home. If that important that you once added to your CSS keeps you up at night, don't worry. Whoever lived in my house put the whole fuse box underneath the staircase. And I only found out about it once I got the keys. When I inherit a code base built by someone else, after you get the keys, I go through a general high-level audit to see what I'm dealing with. So let's approach it. Again, auditing CSS is really hard because it just works. Styles cascade and interact in complex ways that are immediately obvious, and the visual nature of CSS means that the problems are very likely context-dependent. And what you perceive as a flaw actually might just be your opinion, because remember, you're not fixing something that is broken, it's working already, and that kind of makes issues kind of difficult to spot. And more often than not, when I approach a CSS audit, I have to forget about the shiny design systems, because if they exist, the majority of the times, they haven't been updated since the original design and sign off and build. The good news is that nowadays, it's common to inherit a code base that doesn't stray too much from the pattern we normally see. Even for small organizations with large websites, you'll almost always find a main file that imports a bunch of tokens, variables, utilities, and things like that. The structure doesn't normally stray too much from this pattern, which is why after a while you're just looking at code that makes sense. It just sounds reasonable, and you just scroll, and it's really hard to spot issues. And when you have zero documentation or style guides, you may need to start by figuring out how many different components make up a website, like a header, cards, footer, navigation, etc., just to get a sense of the amount of work you might be dealing with. But nowadays, I can spot a few glaring issues quite quickly, like multiple selectors to fix specificity issues. Like in this case, this code base was constantly overwriting styles set via very high-level heading 2. So by the time you would add an H2, your style was you would inherit a style that did not match the designs anymore, and this was done at a very high level. I was recently looking at a code base with lots of supports for CSS Grid, which immediately gave me a timeline of when this code might have been built, because beware, we had no Git history. Sometimes the code gets sent to you on a zip file. It happens, it's normal. Grid has been baseline for a very long time, and this means that there's a lot of cleaning up to do, because if I don't do so, I have to pay special attention to where I add new code, because it has to go inside the supports grid. I still find I11 targets too. I know, incredible. I love it. It's like finding a fossil, like digging a dinosaur. But with this particular example being in SAS, it tells me that conversations need to be had about browser support and testing, because it might be a very specific good reason why it's there. I don't know the demographics. I don't know the specific users that are currently visiting this website, especially on niche topics. If you keep finding that inside many components there's a margin or a padding being reset, it may mean that something on a high level has gone wrong and is no longer suitable. And it's now constantly being reset instead of tackling the issue at source. And this happens a lot with CMSs, where we just had a high level margins to everything that you put inside the what you see, what you get type thing. And then it doesn't suit the designs, or people, instead of fixing it, we just reset the margins and patterns that are not suitable for the design we want. One time, I had to find a class called accordion title. And I was quite confused when the search returned nothing. And so what was done here, again using SAS in this case, was to store the current parent selector accordion in a variable called root. And later on, the root variable can be accessed when nested and avoids hard-coding the class names. Now, I'm pretty sure this technique is really useful, but I personally prioritize readability and easier developer experience than this type of optimization, because what I learned here is that I cannot trust that the search results are true. Finding the class name by searching it is always going to be an uncertain task. So if this is a technique that makes your life easier, by all means do it, but consider leaving comments of the possible outputs so that the code is at least searchable and findable. So there's other bits you may pick up on, outdated layout approaches that can be replaced with modern CSS features, but only if they're a problem. Performance improvements, is quite likely that things like font display were not really applied, especially if it's an old code base, and this allows text to appear with a fallback font while the font loads or fails to load. Accessibility concerns. For example, you're looking at an old code base, you can probably start spotting things, oh, we can improve this. This is an easy, low-hanging fruit ticket for us to improve our accessibility. Or example, you see that some elements are hidden visually, but you also now know they are also accidentally removed from the accessibility tree. These are, or even opportunities to implement a new alt text for CSS-generated content. This is really good fun stuff. Sarah Sweden gave a comprehensive, super detailed talk about accessibility in CSS at CSS Day last year, so it's definitely worth your time. Have a look. And another thing you'll notice as you scroll through the code is media queries and responsive behaviors that add layers of complexity that aren't immediately visible. These are also incredible documentation, because you'll often see things like, oh, if I'm on a small resolution, don't show this thing. And that's product documentation that may not exist anywhere else. And also the unused and duplicated styles that we all can probably spot. Right. In the UK, when you buy or sell a house, a surveyor is normally involved, and they love this little device, the bane of my existence. This is called a moisture reader, and they audit your walls and they check for damp, but beware. If you check the walls during summer or during winter, it will output different results. But then again, I mean, if you do have water damage, it will shower at you, but it will also shout if your walls are absolutely fine, and then you have difficult conversations to have. Which brings me to automatic audit tools. During your own CSS audits, you might think about using automated tools as part of your audit and data gathering. The topic of CSS refactoring isn't new, and throughout the years, we've had tools come and go, so I'm just going to share some that are active and maintained that I personally find quite helpful. Project Wallace is a free tool that can be used in your browser or on your CLI, and it does exactly what it says in the package. It tells you what it thinks about the complexity, specificity, performance, etc. of your CSS. CSS stats is also a really fun one, as it includes the spacing resets, which, as I mentioned before, is something I personally look at. And having a number gives me a high-level overview of how big of an issue this is. Since I've done this talk, Project Wallace also implemented spacing resets, which I'm very thankful, and it's my minor contribution to this world. In Chrome DevTools, there's a simpler overview of your CSS. I've had some shaky experiments with it, but what I like about it is since it is integrated with the browser, if you click on the things mentioned, it'll take you straight to the element where that styling is being used. And it does things like colors, fonts, unused declarations, and media queries. And also in Chrome, you can have a quick look at the coverage tool, which gives you an overview of unused CSS and JavaScript in a loaded page. But if you can hype it up and use something like Puppeteer that goes through a bunch of pages and gives you a more accurate result. Because in this case, it's telling me, oh, you're not using all your CSS loaded. Yes, yeah, I know, it's true. I'm not going to do that. I don't. My website, my personal website is not an emergency website, so it's OK. And in Firefox, I quite like this view in the style editor, where it lists all the rules found in the CSS loaded. And by looking at my own website, I immediately spotted a few of them that actually could use some review and update. And when I use the same tool on a real website, it tells a more complex story. Yeah, it's still playing, it's scrolling. Yeah, this is a real website. These are all the media queries used on a real-life website. This may be a necessary complexity or a sign that designs were very strict and fluid layouts were not applied. We're now in 2025. We don't need this anymore. And different brains process things completely differently. The same website, but using Chrome, compiles media queries together, while Project Wallace gives you options to sort by source order, sort by count, or alphabetical order. So your brain may process this data completely different. There's options now. And when you run a CSS automated audit, the high numbers in reports can seem alarming, but they just might be completely appropriate for your project. If an audit tool flags that you have 100 different colors in CSS without understanding the context or purpose of those colors, it doesn't give me a lot of useful information, because you might be dealing with a website, like an online shop, that needs to catalog all the possible colors. But it will also bring up colors used in SVGs, which, again, are unnecessary to know about. So these raw statistics don't capture the nuance of intentional design decisions. And even assuming that specificity data is useful, these tools cannot distinguish between necessary complexity and technical debt. Sometimes you need complexity to override third-party tools like the horrendous cookie banners or chatbots. And after you feel you have a sense of what the code base you're dealing with, and you have high-level notes of technical bits and your attention, let's consider the practical next steps. Document low-hanging technical debt in tickets, label the quick wins for momentum, and ask questions. You can ask questions about what is the browser support, roadmap, known problems, and document them. Every day someone shares something really cool with CSS, so if something got you excited, it will be perfect, and it will be perfect for existing or future projects that you know about. Make it visible to everyone. You can spin your own baseline and make it part of your toolkit. Google recently announced the baseline checker, which should help you be even more specific to your project because it allows you to upload the analytics. And this is great for me because I work with specific websites and demographics that will likely use really old devices. One of my baseline wish list is the text box trim that, despite not being in Firefox yet, is actually safe to use, but I can keep an eye on it. Once I realized that the quote to up all the rooms was more than I could afford, I was forced to scale back. I decided not to work in the kitchens and the bathroom because, they were clean and functional, it could wait. And my contractor told me something interesting. You should wait anyways. Live in it and find the pain points because then you'll know what you want. The same applies to code. Low-hanging fruit and glaring issues are great motivators to start conversations and feel motivated to just improve the code. But like we know, CSS just works. And it'll take some time to fully grasp how much impact the legacy code base is having on you and on your developer experience until you actually work on it. And it may take a while, which is ideal if you're not a freelancer or a contractor brought in on purpose to do that job. But it's a little bit like a therapy session. You should ask yourself a few questions and document them. What is causing me to take longer to make a change or add a new feature? What normally comes back as a bug after we work on this code base? What do I dread to touch? Could anyone arrive to this project and make this change? Is it a real problem, or is it just not done to my taste? So I thought I'd share some real-life examples of pain points that I've recently experienced. Example 1. Whenever we add a new feature that allows some rich text to be added by a CMS, the utility class the project currently uses adds extra margins to the container as well as to all the paragraphs. This means that lots has to be reset every time a new feature, especially if only one paragraph of text is added. I feel like this is a very frequent issue that comes up a lot. Another example, the new spacing guidelines are very different from the existing ones in the code base. Sometimes they don't want to change the existing things. They want the new stuff added in. Doesn't matter. Ignore everything else. Just add these. So whenever we add a new feature, it inherits the existing spacings, and we have to overwrite it to match the new designs. Or another example is the same template is being reused from multiple differently styled cards, and we have to go in deep in specificity. It takes time to make sure we're changing the correct thing. And like expressing the pain point that I showed before, there's a lot of unnecessary code. Nearly all the code is written inside some supports, which are now baseline. Whenever we make changes to that code, we need to pay extra attention to make sure we're changing it in the right place. We need to discuss how to talk to product people, and they want to know why they should give you the time and money to make all these changes, because it can't just be for your own vanity. Now, I'm going to use product owner or product people, but this means whoever calls the shots on what's being worked on next, and whatever their role name may be. I love this quote from Jerry Reed. It's for design systems, but it applies here. The actual design systems return of investments is scalability, collaboration, and speed, cohesive brand. You can't guess how much money your design system saved you, but product people like that, though. I'm married to a product person. They love a number. You need to make a business case. Product people are tasked with delivering experiences that make money, or at a minimum, don't lose money. We need to connect refactoring to a specific business problem that is being solved, and we must demonstrate how technical debt creates real business impact and document the before and after developer experience, which is very hard. And it's not just metrics like reduced file size or faster loading times. Those improvements are great, but if your website is primarily visited by people on fast desktop connections, it won't make a significant business impact, and you need to highlight specific pain points that generally need addressing. And when you enhance the code base for the developer experience, it takes really hard to materialize, because it may be just for yourself. It's a significant time and money investment. I had to add this quote because it's one of my favorite things in the world, because it's real. If a bug fix isn't tied to a requirement or feature, it gets labeled as tech debt and is shoved to the bottom of the backlog. And let's be honest, tech debt is corporate speak for we'll deal with this, never. Yeah. No, I won't take the credit for that. That's like the author, great. I wish I could take the credit. Can you convince the product owner to refactor a dormant website? Probably not. I mean, I'll be real. They'll probably ask you, how do we get the money back from investing your time doing this? Can you answer that? Probably not either, but let's give this a go. What they also want to know is, how does this mitigate risk? And risk can sound like, if we don't do this, this very annoying thing can happen and it will delay other things. And fair, it's a rare occurrence with CSS, but if you have specific development pain points, this is a time to explain them. Now, let's imagine a time in the future where carousels with CSS are baseline and a fully accessible feature. And then you've got a website that every once in a while gets a few features added, and it has a maintenance budget. That website has some carousels all over it, and the content editors can add one to every page if they wish to do so via the CMS. But that carousel was built many, many years ago with the help of a third-party library. And this is you. You love the craft, you thrive on doing the best you can, then you find yourself itching to go back and improve things as you learn more, but it's not your personal website. And we all got bills to pay, and if you work for an agency, trust me, they do not want you to work for free. They don't want you to go back to client work and do things for fun, for free. If you work on a product team as well, trust me, your product person has a backlog of things on their priority list that they would rather you work on. So how could this conversation go? Let's try. Attempt one with future carousels with CSS. Hey, so, you know those carousels on the website? I think we should replace it with CSS carousels. Here's an example. What's wrong with the current implementation? Immediately, party pooper. No, it's not true, it's not true, it's not true. I'm lying. It works, but it's using a third-party library. It's always good to delete some code and remove reliance on JavaScript. That would work for me. I love that. That's a great argument. That will win me over, but that's not gonna happen. This is the opportunity to mitigate the risk of a third-party fallout. Is the third-party library still being supported? Maybe. I mean, I just checked the repo. It hasn't been updated in a while, but I guess there isn't a reason to. Well, I'm not sure if that's where we should be focusing now, since it works. And there it is. It died. Context dependent, of course, but what happens if that third party stops being maintained? What if it's bought? What if it suddenly changes pricing plan? What if it starts injecting unwanted code? This is the opportunity to mitigate that sort of risk. So that's not going to cut it. It doesn't work. Trust me, I've tried. It's been 10 years under my belt. If they entertain the idea, which can happen, they might ask a few more things. These are examples of questions to be prepared to answer if you want to make a case with product, regardless of the feature you're keen to refactor. Is it limited on how it looks like? Is UX improved? Does it feel more native? Does it unlock new features? Can we reproduce the exact same design? Let's try again. Different approach. So I learned about this web feature. Now that it's safe to implement, I think we should use it on this component we have on our website. We've been pretty good with accessibility overall, and refactoring this component to use something we know is accessible will increase our confidence. Sometimes a good selling point can be like, if we do this, we can imagine. I know numbers are a bit silly to say, but we can make a website go from 90% accessible to 100% accessible. However, this may not be a convincing argument if the website isn't accessible and only this feature would be. But it may be the upsell, especially a number that product people also can back themselves with for justification for their own people they talk to. So this will be mitigating the risk of accessibility standards increase, which is something that we also care about. Or, last resort, hey, since we have some hours per sprint for personal development, and I learned about this web feature, and now that it's safe to implement, I think we should use it on this component we have on our website. I would like to spend my time this upcoming sprint experimenting with this. You may work somewhere that allows you to spend some time on personal development or projects that are work-related. If your employer is paying for your ticket to be here today, this is exactly for you to go back and have time to implement the things you've learned today. It's part of the job. Right. Assuming the CSS with carousel went well, let's address other pain points. This is a shorter version of how I will lay out the issues, so don't be shy to go in depth with examples. Hey, bestie, so we have a lot of CSS inside support security for IE11 issues. This makes changes really time-consuming and prone to errors. Is IE11 still a browser we support? So I had a look, and we haven't had a single visitor using IE11 in the past 6 months. Let's remove it then. And then they say the worst thing. We need a time estimate. Oh my God. We love a big refactor. And we feel so special when we see the big numbers on the files change tab on GitHub, and we're like, ah. But the world doesn't spin around us, and those big changes also imply big testing. And this may also be a project that only has a few allocated hours per month. So you may get back and say, let me think about it, get back to you. This is happening in a lot of features, so we will also need to test them all. Let me know when you have a time estimate, but it might be a while until we have time to book, in a sprint, to book that amount of work. But changes that need a big general regression, like testing, impact everyone. So increase the chances of getting your refactor approved by product by suggesting it to be aligned with planned feature development. Or who knows, holidays, periods, slow business periods, and a new team member onboarding. So actually, in this example, it may come from product themselves. Like, OK, in that case, instead of doing it in one go, let's attach that work to when we're working on those features so that testing is included instead of doing a general regression testing. Product people prefer refactors to rebuilds. You can speed your approval by preparing your arguments. Is there metrics to track CSS-related bugs reaching user acceptance criteria? User acceptance testing, apologies. Have you documented development roadblocks and slowness due to the need of a refactor? Can you demonstrate how the current CSS impacts feature development? Has this been documented to the product team before? Do you have visibility of the product roadmap? If so, are there upcoming features that might be affected or benefit from this refactor? And are you able to share how the lack of a refactor impacts your time estimates? Because this is also important. If you give incorrect time estimates, it's impacting product as well. If a refactor is impacting that, it would improve the predictability, which allows product people to actually plan with more confidence. It makes their life easier. Don't procrastinate. Messes only grow with time. You can easily make excuses and hold off from doing something until the conditions are right or seem stable. Perfection isn't possible, but progress is. And it can be really intimidating to approach the product team. I know that. And as someone who has experience working in an enormous company with hundreds of developers where only some voices are heard, it can be a frustrating experience too. Do not be discouraged to document your opinions and your knowledge and share them. Instead of a product owner, those people might actually be your teammates or a manager or an engineering manager, etc. So you've waited, you've figured out what your pain points from a developer perspective, and you've got the green light from product owner to carry on and do the work. So here's some bits that I've kept in mind recently. Harry Roberts wrote and gave some talks about CSS refactors nearly 10 years ago, and they still hold on to their practicality. Harry calls them the refactoring tunnels, and the idea is to refactor component or feature in isolation, keep a temporary file to allow overrides of the new refactored component, and then delete those overrides once you tackle the higher level utilities that are causing the need for overrides. The temporary file can be called something sensible, and this is the most helpful and hopeful route to go. There is an article in Smashing magazine that actually shows an example using cards applying this technique on that link. But let's think about improvements that can only be done on a component level. So I'm the first to admit that I still get caught up naming things and then regretting it, basically. My brain is sometimes on autopilot, and I may take the designs literally, so it wouldn't be unusual on my daily work to build the typical card block. We love a card block. From the designs, you can see there's a simple card style, later styles, and another card from team members, some shared styles. And so you may go with the approach of breaking them into two, call one card event, another card person, and then you deliver the website. It's beautiful and glorious. There's a team, a card, and then bam. Actually, the content editors realized that the card can also be useful to do other stuff. So the person card block now fits other needs, and that actually weren't really specified. So now you have a naming for things that don't really match the usage. So think about how a feature will evolve. It's exactly what Josh Tumat says in their talk, how we keep going on, roundabouts and APIs. So regardless of the reason why refactoring is being done, use that opportunity to make your life easier in the future is a great idea. This example is great. Instead of doing something like, oh, dark mode as a class name, think about how a theme can evolve. So once we figure out to name things, we can go one step forward from the idea of using the class property as the only way to represent the state of an object. And this can also depend on the project you're working on, but I've been embracing data types recently, and that helps me clean the CSS a little bit because it's also available in the JavaScript, so if it's necessary, we can go from there. Another great example of doing the same thing is a progress file. Instead of using status of loading or success or error as a class name, if using a data attribute, it also works perfectly fine, as you can install it and access it via JavaScript. There's an excellent, thorough read done by Keith Circle that gives you excellent examples and guides, which could look something like this. Even borders, border collapses would also work that way. I'm sorry, I'm rushing it because I'm looking at my time. Bring CSS logical properties and values to the table now. It's time to embrace them. Translations are here to stay. And if you go back to a block that, oh, just change this padding, take the time to convert them to the brand new way of doing it. Because CSS logical properties will save you a lot of work in the future if you are doing also translation work. And more. We can now move on from replacing media queries with container queries or removing them completely with CSS functions, font, clamp, and more. I won't go into detail about CSS things because Manuel is going to give an excellent talk tomorrow about new CSS, so I'll jump on that. But my message is do maintenance every time you work on a component because testing will be included. If you got a small task in a component, regardless if CSS related or not, take that opportunity to give it specificity issues some love. Nested classes gives us a visual hierarchy, which is really satisfying to our brain as a developer once we're working on it, but they actually make our life difficult in the end. If a component is being fully tested because of a small change, increase the time estimate a little bit to include CSS maintenance. And this is also the time to move on from pixels to rems, where font sizes are being used, and use logical properties, etc. So what about automated testing? We've moved beyond the era of pixel-perfect design, and we're now in a fluid, adapted designs that respond to the user's needs, devices, and accessibility preferences. And this is a challenge for traditional automated visual regression thing, and even with thresholds, it may not be the best use of resources and budget, because unless you have a very specific product need, it's not the reality for places like charities to have the money, to have the investment for that. So in my view, individual component testing is still, in my experience, the best. So imagine a faulty boiler, a faulty tap, grimy cupboards, handles, and a drafty window being components of your website that eventually got some love and sit tightly with everything else. I mean, sure, the edges need some love, but the pain points were fixed. It's all about progress, not perfection. Writing tidy and non-chaotic CSS is a skill that I have to work on every day, a skill that you can work on just by going back and mending, not just brand new things from scratch. And a lot of loud people think that using a framework removes the need to work on a skill, but you're only adding risk rather than mitigating. And you already have enough risks by trying to do an npm install these days. CSS really just simply works. Just use it. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Hannah. Would you join me? Wonderful. Also the wonderful tools and the techniques. Thank you so much for that. Questions that came up. One of them came interestingly. There was an interesting one from Maya. When a full rewrite wasn't an option for us, an approach we use is to slowly replace the old code with new. But what exactly would it look like, or what should it look like in a CSS context? Would you go for using Tailwind and add it along old styles, or using something like cascade layers to override legacy code?
I personally I think this question was typed before I finished my talk. I personally would not add more layers of risk. I would not add a tool like Framework at that point. I feel like we need to future-proof it, and right now we can go with the second option. It is work, it is consuming, and it is nervous-wracking. But you have to accept that you will live with mess for a while. It's not going to be a perfect job done in the moment. You will have commented code, because sometimes you might have to leave it. But that's what build tools are for, to clean up things. If you're unconfident, leave it, because going back, sometimes you need the history, sometimes you need to refer to, sometimes it's normal to be afraid, but you have to accept that you may live with mess for a little while.
Yeah, I think it's, for me, I guess the most challenging part is that whenever you're dealing with legacy, I think we often forget that it's not just legacy code or legacy design or legacy this or that. Very often you also have people who rely on legacy that need to be transferred from one thing to one way of working to another. And very often it's not just copy-pasting or kind of refactoring that legacy thing alone. You might be improving the process, maybe really rebuilding rather than
I believe that every refactor is closely tied to the culture you have in your team. It's important to have team members that get it, but I know I was making a couple of jokes about the product team, but they're not the enemy. If we're all in a safe environment where we can all talk safely about, look, this makes my life really difficult every time I have to touch this thing, it also makes their life difficult, because they're also trying to plan development around holidays, around deadlines and things like that. And I feel like it's all about a culture of safety and openness and because people are flexible, and it's not just arguing back and forth, it's about the team culture itself as well.
But I also think that sometimes it just feels very daunting to even look at legacy, because you have this maybe monolithic file and it has just everything, maybe it's, I don't know, tens of thousands of lines. It's like jQuery back in the day.
Yes, it's terrifying, and which is why I found more, when I was trying to talk about low-hanging fruits, even doing a tiny accessibility and performance improvements, that feels like it gives you the little kick to do things. Yeah. It's the momentum. It's all about momentum. Even when I was doing my house, it's like you have to start somewhere, and messes are paralyzing, but pick up the small bits, or I find really encouraging, instead of like thinking low-hanging fruits, like I want a small thing that anybody could jump in and get it done, especially if it's a junior developer just joining the team. And those, slowly, surely, it'll get removed and moved, but the mess will be there in between, and that's something you have to be comfortable with.
Yeah, so it's just kind of finding the strategy to break it apart in some meaningful chunks and approach them, right? There are also quite a few questions just in general about how to structure CSS. Anonymous Dragon is asking.
Oh dear.
Okay. How to best organize CSS files that use various viewports by components or by viewport sizes?
I've tried the viewport approach, and I personally didn't work for me or the team I was working with at the time, because it was a team that anybody, including someone who's more a back-end person, could come in and just add a minor thing, and they would go straight to the component file. I think everything related to the component could potentially live together. Mostly not because it's the best way. It's about the team you're working with. It's about knowing your coworkers and adapt to what works for everybody, so that nobody wants to make a mistake. No one wants to push something and turns out they didn't add it inside the mobile view. Nobody wants that, and no one wants to set up anyone for failure either. So it is about adapting to the team you have. I think that's what works best for me.
Yeah, I think that whenever we have a conversation about CSS, this is just a matter of minutes until Tailwind comes along. And then we have a conversation about Tailwind. So I better ask, I guess. So when it comes to Tailwind, right? So I see, for example, a lot of times where you have beautiful CSS architecture, where we have a lot of utility classes, and it seems like you have a very small CSS file and a huge HTML file. With I can see you being allergic to Tailwind. Maybe?
Gosh, no.
I guess.
So what is it? Sorry,
yes,
finish the question.
So just as a question, there are apparently because we had this conversation just 2 weeks ago. There are different ways of how to approach that. So of course you could use @apply in Tailwind, but then developers will always tell me no.
But wait, apparently that's now okay to do it.
Is it?
Yes, apparently so. I haven't tried the newest one, but apparently it makes things a bit more pleasing to people like me. I personally don't like the approach to put it all in the HTML. It's because I am an advocate of allowing anybody to look at the source and be able to understand what is going on. I believe in anybody should be able to open a source view and understand how a website works in order to build their own personal website. That makes it more difficult to one of the things I stand by, which is I think everybody should be able to build a little website for themselves.
Yeah.
That's my reasoning for it. It's not a very cool tech lead thought, leadership thought. It's more like of an indie community way of thinking. I personally have used Tailwind at work. Of course, nobody wants to be behind. Everybody wants. You have to touch the tools to have an opinion on them. Personally, I use the apply, and then I found like an article saying that's not the way you should use it. And I was like, well, tough. It works. CSS works. When it works, why change it?
Yeah.
That's my personal view on it. Maybe it's not very the answer people wanted, but I think the beauty of CSS is that when it works, I want to overcome the fear of being doubtful and, what if this is not the way cool people do it? Well, no one cares.
Yeah, because there's also I think, RVC or something in Tailwind, and you have Tailwind plugins, and it's like it feels like we are really building up
and
things.
then you do an NPM install in 6 months, and everything.
Yeah. So I do have to ask. I'm just curious at this point. So who is using Tailwind? It's a safe place. Okay, so majority, I would say. Okay. Okay. So we know now. That's great.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm just saying. I'm not judging. I'm being very respectful, I think. All right. There was one more question that also came up from Sasha. Sasha is wondering, so how would you test for unwanted side effects, especially when you have like a fragile, you mentioned that a little, when you have fragile code base and you don't want one thing to kind of break another. Is it like visual regression testing?
It's context dependent. In my case, we've had a specific project that really needed, it was about states inside the thing. It really needed that. There are tools for that. There's paid automated tools that test that. But in my case, working with charities, the budget is very, very small to invest in those tools. We're front-end developers. We're sitting in front of our laptop and we're resizing window half of the day. That's all we do. So if someone is looking at us, we're not really typing all the time. We're just resizing the window. A lot of testing does happen that way.
Yeah, for sure.
It is. I don't. At this moment, I'm not working with websites complex enough that are a daily occurrence. It happens. The tools are out there, but But we also have to trust humans. Like tools make mistakes. The human touch, the human checking. So because it does get signed off. The product tests it, QA tests it, you test it when you develop it, and before you commit to it, please do test it before you push and go through the CI. And there is a lot of humans involved that it can still be a thing, but yeah, the tools are out there, especially for screenshots and comparison, but it is an expensive setup. Yeah. And it's one of those things that I actually believe that there are people who are specialized in automation testing for a reason, because it's not easy. Yeah, so testing on its own. I think also just maybe one more final questions, and then we can wrap up this part. I remember vividly, I think it was maybe 3 years ago or so, when I met a front-end developer, young front-end developer, and for the very first time in my life, I realized that the person had no idea what Internet Explorer is. I had someone recently, he was 17, he told me, I think it's so cute when you guys share these black and white websites, and he meant the screenshots from Internet Explorer. He thought the websites were like gray. Oh. And I was the world is different now, I think. Yeah, I was like, I never thought about that. It makes sense. But yeah. There will be situations where we have had people that access websites in specific regions of the world who will have very old machines that will still run, or especially if they're government or schools, they're not allowed to update software, and most of the websites probably don't work in it, by the way, because we've ruined everything as usual. But it is still a reality that we're very like the north of hemisphere still thinks everybody's carrying an iPhone in their pocket or an expensive, the latest Android, and it's not. That's not real.
I think for a long time there was somebody who was probably just making fun of Smashing Magazine, because when we look into data, there was every single year, because you look at the browsers that are being used, right? And there was one person who was every year coming to the website with the user agent, Internet Explorer 666.
It's very cursed.
Yeah,
I would be afraid. I would call a priest.
It stopped happening, but when you look in the data, you have all these like browsers, and you have IE 666, because the pie chart must be relatively large to even be visible. It's like, what the hell is this happening? Literally.
Wow.
So hopefully you don't experience this ever. Well, with this in mind, if you have any questions to Anna, you can find her in the next to the fireplace. And thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, everyone.